Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey. Thank you so much for stopping by. Going to be a fun conversation today. We are traveling the globe. If you looked at the title, it's Whiskeys Around the World, tied in with the Houston Whiskey Social. We have two guests today, owners of the Houston Whiskey Social. We have Todd Grube and Dominic Sung. How you guys doing?
Great.
Excellent.
Thanks for
having
coming
us.
on.
Yeah, thanks
Appreciate you
for
for
having us.
having
We
us.
appreciate it, man.
Yeah. So we're going to have a fun conversation, like we said, going around the globe, talking about all kinds of whiskeys, but we're going to tie this into this great event that goes on here in Houston. It's the 9th year of this event. And I don't want to talk too much about it. I'm going to let you guys do it. How it started, what was the vision, and kind of what it's grown to, evolve to now. Because it's not just a tiny thing anymore. This thing is pretty big. And what I mean by that is the brands that attend, and let's just say celebrities that also attend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had some. And Graham McTavish is going to be coming back again this year. We're excited about that.
That's great.
This brand, McTavish Spirits. Yeah.
You want to go ahead?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
sure. Okay. Well, so Chris Hart started it as a dinner, and I'm probably going to mess up the story, so I won't get into too much detail, but I know it was kind of a smaller dinner. And then the event kind of grew from there. And I think by the third year or so, they were in a larger venue. And from there, it's just grown year after year, and we're kind of maxed out. I think last year we hit 1,500, 1,600 people in the room, which was a bit too much, I think. So we cut back just a little bit. So it's still going to be a really good crowd this year. I think we're shooting for 1,200. I think we may not have that many in the room. We usually have 70 tables. So it's not always 70 brands. Some of the brands bring their whole line, and it may be more than one table. So we normally say about 350 individual releases.
Okay. Different
Whiskey
pours.
and spirits. Yep. So it's a lot to taste through.
Okay. Before I go any further, Carter, I should have said it first.
I put reached stepchild status.
You start showing up more and you'll be a little, no.
Oh, dang. No, it's happy to be here. And I think we should probably mention where we're at as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Todd set this up. Where are we?
Reserve 101. So for people who haven't been here in a while, you can see behind us what a different bar that it's become. Super exciting. It's amazing. I think we can see in the corner the whiskey wall back here. Of course, the big, beautiful bar. Reserve 101 is downtown, right across from the House of Blues.
Downtown Houston. For those who
Yep.
might be listening, not knowing we're in Houston. So yeah. And this is I mean, you say very popular. I mean, it's popular because the drinks, the whiskey selection, the cocktails they produce, we'll get into that later, are just outstanding. I mean, it's a great place to come have it, a pour or a
Absolutely.
cocktail.
Yep.
Yeah, I always tell people that are from out of town that are asking me, "Hey, where's a good place to get a cocktail, or where's a good place to get a pour of whiskey?" I'm like, if you're going to be in downtown, Reserve 101, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, outside of coming to our event to taste a lot of different things, they have the largest or close to the largest whiskey selection in the whole state of Texas.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think that right now, Sean was telling me, Sean Fitzmaurice, one of the owners, the other, Jace Van Hooser. Just want to thank them again for having us here and for partnering with us on so many things. But 1,200, I think, different pours right now.
Wow.
And I think he's shooting for in the next year to get up to 2,000.
Well,
And that includes Dusty's also.
okay, bingo. You just hit. Yeah, I wanted to mention that because I know that with the law changing and the availability or the ability to be able to get some of those on your shelf, pretty cool. And he's kind of dove right into that.
I brought one with us that we can taste through, and maybe this is the first one too because it's lower proof. This Old Grandad, I think it's from 1992, 1991, something like that.
Is that a national? Is that national?
It's not. No, it's Frankfurt.
Okay.
Yeah. But last September the laws changed, and Reserve is one of the bars that I don't really know of another bar in town that's bought more, taken advantage of the laws. So they can procure these and sell them behind the bar, which is pretty awesome. And that's something we do at the event too for people who've been coming the last few years. We bring Dusty's in. And so just with the price of your ticket of admission, you if you're lucky enough to find Dom, myself, or Chris, or one of the other staff members, you'll find bottles like this. Just we're pouring it for free, basically.
Yeah.
Mix them into the night, have something special for people, and stuff that you're not going to find on the shelf, just sitting there.
Yeah, I got to try a couple birth year things
Nice.
at the Houston Whiskey Social, which was pretty cool. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys geek out about that, but I'm like, oh yeah, I want to try a
think we
birth
all
year
do.
something.
I think, yeah, for sure. Right? There's something special about, like, I think the crystallizing that piece of, man, this was from when I was born, and that liquid hasn't changed in the bottle, and I'm tasting what my parents could have tasted at the moment, right?
That's
Like,
pretty
and
cool.
all that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and you think about the history of the folks who made that
Yeah.
aren't here anymore. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of those folks
Yeah.
probably aren't around, and that bottle they were working it and doing what they were doing. You know, it's just an amazing thing.
Or in the case of like a Jimmy Russell, that they are still around.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I always just think about like the older the bottle, like what was going on in the world at that point.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That somebody just went down the store and bought this. I won't call it bottom shelf, but it was probably a $10 bottle
sure.
at the time in the 90s.
And it probably was a bottom
yeah,
shelf.
Yeah. And it's phenomenal stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about the Whiskey Social again, the dates, when it's going to happen, the time. Give us kind of a, what's the logistics of the event? What can people expect? And we do want to throw it out that you have the website up. Let's mention that, because if somebody's not in Houston, but they're in San Antonio, or heck, if you're anywhere and you decide you just want to fly in for a fun weekend to drink some great whiskeys, pours that you probably wouldn't be able to drink for, I don't want to, hundreds, maybe
Yeah.
thousands of dollars. If you went out somewhere, you can do it all for a very reasonable price. So coming into the town really is an option to come in and enjoy a great event.
Yeah, and we do have people that come in from Austin, San Antonio, and places around to come and have a nice weekend. It'll be November the 16th this year, and it's at the beautiful Citadel Houston. So a nice venue for us that we sort of take over on the Saturday that we have it. There are still some VIP tickets left, and then general admission for sure. So yeah, happy to have everyone come out and
6 to 9 at night.
5 o'clock is VIP entry.
Okay.
So
Yep.
there are limited VIP tickets left, and I think that they're going to sell out this year. We reduced the number just to make it a little bit more VIP for the people that buy those. So
That's cool.
We may sell out of the VIP, and that's what I recommend for people, especially if you're coming for the first time.
You get in an hour earlier. A lot of the vendors will have some of the allocated bottles that are there, and they'll only have one bottle or two bottles of it. So that first hour, you're probably going to get your best shot if you want to taste some of the allocated pieces. That you'll be there in an hour early before the general admission doors open, and so yeah,
And we get everybody in a little bit before the event starts. We kind of corral them, and everyone's kind of peeking into the room to find out where are the brands that I want to see.
where am I targeting?
What bottles do they have?
Yeah.
So everyone's kind of trying to like sneak a look, and because like as Dom said, those bottles will go faster. Not to say that if you get GA, there's not a lot of amazing stuff. There will be,
Right.
especially like I said, we don't start walking around the Dusties until later in the event. So GA people are going to get a taste of these as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about the logistics of where tables are, is there any structure to that? Is it set up in a way where people can kind of know that we're going to have American, we're going to have Scotch, we're going to have Irish, or is it just kind of a, tables are set up where they are? Is there a map? I mean, how do people navigate being able to find the pours that they may want to try?
I mean,
we just met about it.
yeah, we were literally just talking about it. We try to arrange them and mix them up, and space things out in somewhat logical of a way, but also, there's a ton of variety, right? Of everything from Scotch to bourbon to finished whiskey to, Kentucky and Texas and Tennessee and all over the place and where they are. Some of it is that some of the vendors would like larger space for activations they're trying to do in different setups. So we or they need everything logistically from electrical outlets to what have you. So there's some of that finagling, but generally speaking, it's such a broad mix that we kind of look at it and say, okay, we don't want this high concentration of things in a specific area, and then like there's a tight congregation of people who are looking for that. And I think we want to make sure that there's a good flow to how everybody's moving through the rows.
I think that makes sense, because if you think about certain brands that are going to be popular, certain pours that are going to be really popular, if they're all right by each other, that just kind of causes a little chaos.
We want people to walk through the event,
Yeah.
and including we have a cigar lounge outside. The weather's has been beautiful the last few years, so we're hoping for good weather again.
I think we're getting close to really nice weather.
We
so I
are.
think we're going to be pretty good.
Nighttime is great already.
Oh yeah.
It's just going to it'll be a little bit cooler in a couple weeks, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you guys. I know in the past you guys have had some rum representation. Are you guys going to have that there this year?
We do. Yeah. So we like to bring other spirits in. It's interesting to me. First of all, and I'll speak for my wife. She's not a whiskey drinker, and she comes to the event because she wants to support the event. And we have other people, husbands and wives and friends, who come with their friends, and they're not big whiskey drinkers. So we like to have something for them.
Sure.
So we even have had beer. Do we have a beer this year?
Not
Maybe not.
fully confirmed, but maybe.
Okay. And last year, I think Ferrand and Plantation brought like coconuts, and they had rum. I think we do have Bruegel this year.
Yeah, Brugal will be there. Grander
there's
will be there. Has a rum, and then Palm Bay has some other spirits, and then we'll also have a tequila as well. So.
Yes.
Oh, cool.
So that was something I wanted to get into because it is to your point, Matt, the other spirits that are very popular. And if we know, the Houston Whiskey Social is a lot of the people who attend from Houston are members of the Houston Bourbon Society. And you hear Bourbon Society and you think, okay, it's just all about bourbon, but it's really not.
It's the Booze Society.
It's the Booze Society. So that was one of my questions was, how is this going to evolve and to include cognac? And
so that group, I think, did influence the event. And now let me first say that it surprised me when I first started attending that there weren't more people from the Houston Bourbon Society. I think last year it was like 22%, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a lot of people that we don't know. Even so the Houston Bourbon Society is over 15,000 people.
Yeah.
So we just expected them just to all descend on the event, but it's really not the case. And last year we had something like 61 or 62% new attendees that had never been before. So
Well, you probably
It
got
really
way
turns
more
over.
positive reviews then.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh, they're a great group. Yeah.
well, we were there last year together and we met, I think it was 3 or 4 different groups or couples that were in from out of town that came.
Oh,
to the
yeah.
study. And I remember
Yeah.
one being from Iowa that they
Okay.
had family
Oh, wow.
out here, heard about the social that was going to happen
Yeah.
and decided, hey, let's just tie it into a trip
Yeah,
to go see
sure.
family and go to the,
I have friends that fly in every year from New Jersey, Delaware, and Pennsylvania.
okay.
But to get back to the question about the other spirits, because Dom mentioned tequila. So something that the listeners may not realize is how many spirits are aged in bourbon barrels, because bourbon can only be used once for it to be considered bourbon. So then they sell those barrels for pretty cheap. And you have brands like Jack Daniels that just have like thousands, tens of thousands of these barrels. They sell them to the rum companies. They sell them to the tequila companies. And so one of
and scotch.
and scotch, yeah, the tequila and brandy and everything. The El Tesoro is coming, and El Tesoro is owned by Beam Suntory,
Okay.
and they age in whiskey casks, bourbon casks. And I think that they're going to be bringing some other cool stuff, like the what's the
Mundial collection.
is that how you pronounce it? I never
Yeah, the Mundial collection. So they take it and they finish them in,
Booker's barrels.
yeah,
and stuff
Booker's
like
and,
that.
Oh,
other
yeah,
things.
nice.
So they're actually gonna be doing a tasting class at the event, and so they'll be bringing out some cool stuff that probably isn't widely seen. And then they're doing sort of the collab with one of their other brands. Knob Creek will be there, and so under the Beam Suntory flag. And that's sort of how it kind of comes up, right? If the question is like, wow, how do you figure out like which rums are there, which things are there? I think it's under the umbrella of some of these brands that have a bunch of whiskey brands. They kind of go, well, we have this other brand. Are you guys okay? And we're like, yeah, you know what? If you want to bring that out, like for the reasons that Todd was saying, like it's nice to have other choices, and we do encourage that it's a little bit nicer an event. People are a nicer evening. They don't want it just to be like me and my bros, right? Like I want my wife to attend, or like we want a few couples to get together and go. And it's nice. I would say just like I love a bar like Reserve 101 where I can get a neat pour and have all the choices I want, and also if I want to pivot to having a nice cocktail or something different, like I can get it all in one spot, and that's kind of what we want to have at
for
the
sure,
event.
man.
I also want to kind of go back to the social and talk logistically a little bit about, you guys are big on preparation, making sure people that are going to come, you put the word out, you keep reminding them about hydration, safety getting to the event as far as, taking an Uber or something like that. And then you guys always provide a pretty darn good spread. I mean, there's food that, to help kind of sustain you a little bit while you're sipping on some pours.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is you encourage people, don't be afraid to dump. You don't
Yes.
have to finish everything. I mean, there's some pours that, you're going to.
Yeah, I'm not going to quit on some things, but yeah.
Yeah, we try. I mean, it's because the event is sort of out on an island a bit. It's not far from downtown. It's maybe 15 minutes, but yeah, we want people Ubering in. We tell them, and I make several posts and we send several emails in advance. This year, we're even handing out little like how-to cards. How to get through this event safely, because it's a lot of pours.
Yeah.
And if you first dump, eat before you come, drink lots of water, and we buy like 100 cases of water.
Yeah.
So there's 2,400 bottles of water in the
Right.
event for people to drink, and we encourage them to do that.
Well, and the other thing I would say is that if we always say keep exploring, whether it's food, wine, whiskey, coffee, explore the world. If you tie one on too quick, you're kind of missing the point of the evening. You're not going to enjoy and get the experience that you really want. So
Yeah.
I would say most people there, you would think Houston Whiskey Social maybe have some of that going on. I don't see a lot of people who are just,
shit faced.
like at the event, they do kind of view it more of a classy type event.
It is, and that's why we promote it as such, and why we have a dress code, and we don't really enforce it super strong. If someone shows up and they're not,
in shorts.
yeah, the shorts, I wouldn't love that.
Yeah.
We haven't had that, but
No, I
we've
haven't.
had t-shirts. I mean,
Yeah.
I wear a t-shirt, but
With a jacket.
I wear a tux jacket on top of it.
Yeah.
So it is, we want people to understand when they walk through the doors, it's not a big party. We don't have music. There's not live music or anything like that.
There might be a series game on or something.
there might, and
We've had to deal with
we allowed the Astros, even though my Phillies were playing them at the time.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Sorry about that.
It was a tough moment. I had tickets to the game that I gave up because that was, if you remember, that was the year that the rain pushed everything back a day. And I was like, oh, man.
I feel bad for you, but it saved me a couple grand for a losing game. So I'm glad I didn't spend that money.
But yeah, I mean, we do encourage using the dump buckets. I think none of the brands are offended, and if you're having multiple pours at the same table, it's probably not the most couth thing to like pound it and then get the next pour. If you're trying a couple of things, feel free to use the dump buckets. We encourage it. The brands
it
do
is
too.
not disrespectful.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the brands would say they would rather have people in good control and managing that well instead of, like you said, right, losing it a little bit because you had too much too quickly. So yeah.
As far as food goes, I know that you guys have provided food in kind of a spread, but I think was there some talk of a food truck and that kind of thing?
There's always a food truck outside. Actually,
Okay.
I think last year they just didn't show up. But,
Oh, okay.
but normally we have the food truck. So the people outside at the cigar tent, or if we run out of food, which I don't know if we ever have run out. But it just gives people more options. When they leave the event, they see that food truck, and that's when they're like, okay, I need some more food in my stomach.
Yeah.
Like I said, we try to do everything.
Not a bad
we
idea.
can,
Yeah.
because it's a lot of alcohol. It's a lot of stuff to taste. And even taking little sips, like I said, if you go to every booth, that's like 300, 400 sips, it adds up very quickly.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, the other thing I want to say about dumping is, look, let's be honest. I don't think anybody's offended if you say you don't like something.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
You're not going to love it all.
Spirits and wine and food. You're not going to like everything
Yeah.
you try, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So,
And
I
the
think,
event-
go ahead.
the event is busy enough. I would say it's a good balance. There's time to chat briefly with the person, but they're not going to watch you and judge you as you decide if you like it or not.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest part I love about the event, right? In my mind, as a general consumer, also, right? Like you walk into a liquor store and there's always new offerings from every brand, and you kind of go, well, do I $40, $50, $60 a bottle want to try something that I don't know if I'm going to like? And if I don't, then that whole bottle's sitting there. This is a great way for you to be able to go and under one ticket, for probably less than the cost of 2 bottles, be able to go and try any number of shelf available spirit from any number of brands and figure out what you like before. And then on site, we have a retail partner this year. We're partnering with Specs that you can, if you like something, go there, pre-order it. You can't actually buy it and take it home that night, but you can make the pre-order of something you like, pick it up at Specs and then later during the week. So
talking about the value of those pours for the cost, let's just jump into it. The cost to get into the event, the general admission fee and the VIP. Then I want to roll that into the Pappies and the BTAC that you're enrolled for this year.
Oh, yeah. And that we've done in the past, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have different ticket levels. So GA is under $100. The VIP is $155, which I think is the best value. You get that extra hour, but they're both great. and then the Pappy and the BTAC. So BTAC Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. So George T. Stagg, Sazerac, that whole line. Those tickets go pretty quickly and always in the first day. And you get the entire line of each of those. And so that's kind of like the hot ticket every year.
Is there an AI bot that leads that class?
That leads the class.
Yeah.
There is actually. Yeah, he's returned this year for the BTAC because Wade Woodard is going to be. He's been involved with the event for several
Yeah.
years, and he's always run the BTAC. And it's kind of funny why he could run either one that he wants. He chooses BTAC because he feels that it's a better value, because that's what Wade does. He
Yeah.
finds the better value bottles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But everybody wants to try Pappy, and if I think we get a lot of people every year that have never even seen a bottle of Pappy, or
Right.
or they're not going to pay for it at a bar because it's going to be over $100. It could be $200 and up, and we're giving you that for $400 for our event. You get in, you get to taste the entire line, including the rye. So it's 5 bottles or 6, 10, 15, 20, 23, 6 rye and old
12.
or the 12, yeah, the lot B,
Yeah.
yeah.
And leading the other tasting is a local, the owner of Houston Watch Company. So
Oh, cool.
we're leading that. So between those two guys, very, very knowledgeable about the spirits, and it should be a fun time as always.
Yeah.
And his
Eric.
name? Yeah.
Eric.
Okay. Yeah.
I will say last year was the first time that I actually did either one of the Pappy or
Oh,
BTAC
really?
tastings, and I will say the Pappy tasting was super great.
Yeah.
I had a great time. I'd never, I mean, few people do get the opportunity to taste them side by side
Mhm.
in a full lineup, and I've never done that before. So yeah,
Cool. Did you have a favorite?
oh 15.
Yeah. That's 15 is a sweet spot because the age is perfect.
Yeah,
Good. Getting back to Wade, he always says that once bourbon gets past 17, he thinks that it's too oaky. I think there are plenty of examples against that, but
Yeah,
I would
sure.
generally agree. And the 15 is also 107 proof.
yeah.
whereas
So
the
perfect.
other
yeah.
ones get down into the 90s. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it. I don't think I've ever tried the rye before, so that was kind of an
I love the rye.
experience.
I think the rye's great.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah.
And I will say the old Rip is, I don't ever buy it because it's expensive in
Yeah.
a bar or whatever, but it does hold its own.
That's
It's
one of my
very
other
good.
favorites is the old Rip, and Lot B even. It has years where I've thought that it was phenomenal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think the one we tried last year, we were pretty surprised by it. Actually,
Very surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
very-
Because Weller 12 is a good pour.
Yeah.
And this is the same.
I was going to ask you if
stuff.
you've ever done that blind. Has it?
I have. Yeah. It's obvious.
It is obvious.
The
Okay.
Weller 12 is really nice, but it doesn't have as much complexity. You can tell that the Lot B is chosen from different barrels that just have a little bit more going on.
Is it different parts of the Rick House?
Or I'm
is-
not positive on
Okay.
that one. I don't know if it is or not.
I didn't know if they kept them together until they got to a point and said, okay, this one's getting to a
I don't
point we
know.
like, this one's not,
Yeah.
so we're going to separate.
Yeah, I'm not positive on
Okay.
that.
I do want to bring up also, we've talked about it a couple times, the cigar lounge outside. Now, people hearing this might go, okay, cool, I can bring some cigars and go smoke outside. Not just that. There are cigar vendors there as well.
Yep.
There are vendors who will roll a cigar for you right
Mhm.
there. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
And we also have, is it a boot vendor this year?
Working on that, but yeah,
Yeah.
potentially a custom boot vendor.
That's
that-
pretty
that would
cool.
come out.
Last year we had a hat guy.
Yeah, I
So
remember
usually
that,
we
yeah.
have
Yeah,
hats, and
yeah.
So yeah, we like to have something like that.
I think that's
outside.
very cool.
Yeah.
But the cigars are cool, and they'll run special deals for that night, right? Like different packages that wouldn't normally be available at those prices, and so they try to promote all the things and get it going that way. So yeah, we try to have, I think, different things to have it be a more fun event and add some other interesting pieces to it along the way.
Yeah, we've even looked into in the past partnering with like a clothing shop. I want to do this at some point.
I think it'd be cool.
Where we have an event where we drink whiskey at the store and we all create custom jackets or shoes. And then like a week before the event, like we all pick them up and try them on. And we actually went pretty far down the line to make that happen. And
That'd be
it
very
just
cool.
didn't work, but I still want to do that. Like a haberdashery sort of like thing.
Oh yeah,
We just like, we put our outfits together.
I am someone who gets my jackets tailored and made, so I
There
can
we
be
go.
down with that.
Yeah.
So I have a girl who does it, and she does
Nice.
great jobs.
Well, let's start, and we'll come back to the social as things come up as we talk about whiskeys. But let's start diving into the world of whiskey because
Yeah.
this is what the event's about and what we're going to talk about today. I kind of made a list of what I think about, or countries that I think about when I think about whiskey being made. And first, let's just start with, some people might be listening going, wait a second, you mentioned rum, you mentioned, isn't this all whiskey? It's not. In order to be a whiskey, it needs, what's the definition?
Of whiskey? Well, I'll give the definition
A
of
grain?
bourbon. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's made from grains.
Yeah.
Bourbon is 51% corn.
Mhm.
Needs to be aged in a new oak container. I mean, it's America's spirit, and like I said, it can only be used once, and you can't do any finishing or anything on bourbon to be considered straight bourbon.
Yeah.
And then Scotland has its own regulations,
here-
and you know,
Yeah. Here's what I want to do. I want to leave. This is just my opinion. I may be wrong. I want to Scotland, Ireland, USA, Japan, India, Taiwan, and I don't know if it's really whiskey, but I threw Canada in there.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's less regulations,
Right.
less regulations. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll put this one back up. I had pulled this down because this is a cigar malt for the all the cigar talk.
So
So yeah,
I want to.
You want to start
Yeah,
with
sure.
something while we're talking about?
Sure.
I want to leave USA and Scotland to the end because I think could be a lot to talk about there.
Sure.
But let's start with Ireland. And to me, I've heard that Ireland actually has been making whiskey longer than Scotland. That the Scots used to get their whiskey from Ireland, and then it wasn't until something to do with taxes and kings and all that back in the day that Scots, it got too expensive, and they said we're going to make whiskey ourselves, and that's kind of how that evolved. Now, it's what I've heard, right? Unconfirmed report, but do you guys know anything to that effect?
I haven't heard that fact.
I think that's true.
It's not
Okay.
surprising.
I think that's true. Now, I mean,
Irish just didn't market as well.
yeah, I don't know. But
they drink all the beer. They're
it-
more interested in the beer. maybe.
Yeah, but that's a good point.
well, I know that like with Irish whiskey, you can have like, I mean, the stills aren't as stringent. I think like with Scotch, it's like has to be pot stills, and then
I think Irish still also has to be pot. I could be wrong though.
I think it does, but I think it's triple distilled versus
Yeah.
double distilled, right?
Yeah, I'm not as much of an expert on Irish. I love Irish whiskey.
Yeah.
I just can't spit a ton of facts on Irish whiskey. I know a lot of it's pot still.
But it's similar to Scotch.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when
yeah.
people think Scotch and they hear Irish, and the reason I'm saying that is, you heard me say it earlier, keep exploring.
Mhm.
Get into Scotch by all means. Get into all these things.
Yeah.
Try whiskeys from all over. That's the point of the social. But Irish is one of those that I think is a little under the radar that people just think it's not as good. There might not be as many brands, as it might not be as diverse. But there's some, Redbreast comes to mind as some
Yeah.
great offerings that you
It
get
can
from
be
Irish whiskey.
lighter in style. I mean, bourbon drinkers tend to start low proof and then they move high proof, and they want age and all that darkness and just the punch in the face basically.
Yeah.
And Irish can be a lot more delicate and more fruity. I mean, it's certainly with finishing, you can really pack a lot of flavor into it. I love Irish whiskey, and I drink quite a bit of Irish whiskey at
Yeah.
home.
I mean, I thought I didn't at one point, right? But I think as a lot of people do, your only entree into Irish whiskey is maybe Jameson or something lower shelf that's being mixed into other things, and you kind of go, yeah, I don't know, man, that's not the greatest. And then you realize, right, like somewhere along the way, whether it's Redbreast or Teeling or different finishes and the things that I think some of the other whiskey styles like Irish can do and still qualify to be Irish whiskey, maybe differently than bourbon or what have you, right? Because of the regulations that, oh man, like when you taste some of these things, which you can do at the social and things like that, or at your friends or at bottle shares or whatever it may be, it can blow you away at how different and amazing some of the things can be.
yeah,
Let me
Jason.
just say this nose is, I
Oh,
haven't
it's
sipped it yet. It's just like,
butterscotch bomb.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you can see the color, like I said, it's lighter, just like Scotch that's not finished in wine casks and sherry. Like it stays pretty light compared to American whiskey. So this one is made by Barrel, blended by Barrel. This is blend CS01, and it's cask strength Irish whiskey finished in Spanish brandy casks.
oh, wow.
Yeah,
But probably not for long because there's not a lot of color to it. But it's 130.1 proof.
yeah. That's. I mean, I guess I see more Irish cast strength type offerings than I do Scotch cast strength like offerings. But yeah, I mean, if you've never tried cast strength Irish whiskey, it is an experience.
Yeah.
Very different experience.
Yes, definitely.
Rob, you were talking about this one, yeah?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
It was on this.
yeah,
It's like, yeah.
Yeah,
I
just
mean,
butterscotch, right?
Yeah.
and then the palate too. I mean, my goodness, that's good. Thank you for sharing that.
It really is buttery and caramel.
Oh, that's
It's just-
amazing.
yeah.
But it has like I like that kind of burnt toasty kind of quality as well, and it's really nice.
And I picked this one too because first of all, this is like the old granddad is the industry shot, I would say, and especially here at Reserve, if you're doing a shot with a bartender or just it's going to be an old granddad. Usually the bottle and bond. So that's why I brought this one.
Well, it happens to be bottle and bond happens to be my favorite offering of the old granddad current.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I mean, 114 is good. It's just I don't know. It's just kind of a sweet spot.
That proof point is my favorite.
Yeah.
Like,
And also though, people look down on bottles like Old Granddad or Wild Turkey 101, and that's actually silly because again, these brands have been doing this for decades. They've been doing it longer than any of the other brands. I mean, the big brands have Wild Turkey, Beam, Four Roses. I mean, all of them.
I think part of that is because there's this perception, one, that you drink it a lot for a different reason in college, or it's still a well pour. You'll see Jim Beam, you'll see Jack Daniels, Old Number 7. You see
The new Beam 7-year, it's age dated now. It's like a $22 bottle, and it's really better than a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So don't ignore the big brands. They know what they're doing. They can just offer it cheaper.
Another one,
Don't just judge it by the price.
another one I'll throw in there is Knob Creek 9-year.
yeah.
Oh man, it's
that
just
to me is under the radar.
to me that knob 9-year 100 proof is one of the best for the value offerings that's out there.
Same thing, right? Like same sort of deal with the Beam adding the age statement back, right? Like for a while the age statement was gone from the Knob Creek, and they put the 9-year back on there, and you're just like, man, the value for a 9-year age stated Kentucky
And the
bourbon
price only went up
is
$1 or $2.
It's like right around $30. I mean, I would
all
say it
faithful,
fluctuates from 28 to 33. Depending on what you're finding.
And we talked about older bourbon, but I think the sweet spot for a lot of brands is like 7 to 10 years.
Yeah, for sure.
There's so much good in that range.
And the other thing I would say when if you're not experienced at looking at labels, especially when we talk about turkey, if they put an 8 on there, that's the youngest bourbon. A lot of times there is some blend of some 10, 12, 14 year that might be in there.
They do it to make sure the profile is consistent. So there can always be older stock for sure.
Yeah. Let's just get it out of the way. Canada. What do we want to say about them? It might be a little hard on Canada.
There's some good whiskey in Canada.
Wait, let me back up and go. Are there any Canadian lines coming to the whiskey social?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, some of the larger brands own Canadian whiskey, of course.
Yeah.
But I don't
want to dog on them too much.
Yeah, I don't think so. There's just less regulations.
I think as we talk about, right, like what you can or can't do, there's almost no, well, not no rules, but there are a lot less rules of what can qualify for that. So people do things.
Like when you're looking at rye, like Canadian rye, they can do things to it that we can't do here.
I always laugh when Wade says they could call it a Canadian rye and it might have 0 rye in it. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah.
Wow. Okay. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some, like whiskeys that are in the United States that I really like that aren't necessarily bourbon and fall under all these stringent qualities. There's a new brand that I really like out of Louisiana, JT Mellick.
It's excellent. Rice, right?
They use rice.
Yeah.
And I think it's fantastic.
Me too. Yeah. I tried it here for the first time. Actually, I thought it was very good.
Yeah, and I just was there because I do business in Louisiana sometimes, and somebody's like, "You got to try this." I'm like, "Okay, new whiskey brand, whatever." It's all the time, and I was like, "Actually, that's pretty good."
Yeah,
So
family run, family owned. You gotta love that too, right?
Yeah. So not knocking that you can't make things that aren't 51% corn or whatever, 51% rye or whatever it is.
The only reason I'm thinking or I'm saying or giving Canada a hard time a little bit is because of the laxed kind of regulations. I think you have to have some structure, some kind of boundaries that you play within in order to put out a good quality product. If you start just going anywhere you want, then you lose kind of who are you?
Yeah. You want to know what the range is for the spirit, which should be pretty wide.
Yeah.
And that's why with bourbon, like when it comes to the no finishing rule, there are things that people do, like the Lincoln County process with Tennessee whiskey. The debate is that changing the characteristic of the bourbon? And I think we would say no. If you're drinking Jack Daniels, it tastes like bourbon.
Yeah.
I mean, Tennessee can be a little bit sweeter, maybe, but like, has it changed the base character of it? It really hasn't.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, though, that we have that discussion, because it means just that little tweak, and it's
Sure.
almost not. People.
Sure.
There are a lot of people who say it's not bourbon, including those brands, because they would rather just call it Tennessee whiskey. But
And Canada is famous. I would say their go-to whiskey is the rye. Do they make any? Is there anything else that they're kind of known for that I don't know?
like
about?
Crown, I mean, it's a huge seller.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is
Crown Royal.
you know the grains on that? I don't.
I don't.
Okay.
No.
You know if it had rye in it or if it's
Yeah, I don't know what the mash bill is.
okay.
I mean, I think it's pretty similar to bourbon mash bill, but I could be way off on that,
Yeah.
so I don't want to speak on it.
yeah.
And I do think some of that is because, right, like if we think about the climate and how it ages, right, like it's the colder climate,
Yeah, just like
takes longer.
Scotland.
You don't
Yeah.
have the,
like
yeah,
this.
exactly. It
It's
takes
later.
more seasons, right, longer time, and so rye generally takes less of that
Yeah.
variation and needs less. Which if you just extend that out, right, if you were to do the other grades, it would just take infinitely longer, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To age.
Like I just had, I forget the age on it now. I want to say it's like 15 years. William Price has a rye, an older rye, or maybe it's 12. I think it's a 12-year-old rye that they have out. And this was one that it was pointed out online that it's Canadian. But so I went there and tried it this past week, and I loved it. I think it's a phenomenal bottle. I think it's like $50 or $60 for a 12-year-old rye. Again, it's Canadian.
Okay.
But I think it's a very good rye. I've always like when you talk about rum, you have tropical aging, which is similar to what we're talking about. Whiskey in the United States versus whiskey in Canada or Scotland or Ireland. Like we have more of seasons, right? Like we have a lot of more heat and cold. And in tropical environments, you get that darker color. And then when you continentally age rum, it changes the whole profile. Like the base is still there, but it can really turn into something different. So I think that's why it's interesting to try some Canadian whiskeys. It's like that same process, right? Like you take the whiskey, you age it in a cooler climate, you have the lighter color, the notes are different. I see, as somebody who's just a whiskey nerd, I still like to try that stuff because
Absolutely.
you know
Yeah,
what you're going to get. It's not going to taste like anything you're used to drinking.
Sure.
As far as American whiskey goes.
I think the same
It
thing
could be really fun.
we talk about it with Texas whiskey, right? Like
Yeah, that's right.
what things do you have to adjust
Don't expect it to be
for the
Kentucky.
hot climate
Yeah.
that does what it does, right? And
Mhm.
shameless plug for a brand that I may or may not have some interest in, but Fierce Whiskers is a Texas whiskey that is starting to try to do it differently, right? Like
Mhm.
building a rick house into the hillside to try to control temperature and airflow as it goes
And the
through it.
rick house itself has like those shutters too.
Yeah,
right?
there are louvers on both ends to
You guys see
control
that?
airflow.
Oh no.
They,
yeah,
they fully box it out. Basically, they close all the windows. They can, and it's all black, and it just shuts it down so that you're not getting all that heat inside.
Wow.
yeah, so it's a metal brick house, and you can control the louvers to control airflow based on what's happening wind-wise, temperature-wise, and all that to try to manage the temperature in a different way. And I think where in their approach, one would say that like some of the inability to manage those giant temperature spikes and things like that we get in Texas are what cause some different characteristics in the taste of Texas whiskey that one might either not like or make it differently off profile or take so much of an angel share that it becomes difficult to manage from a production standpoint.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people are, whether it's Texas, whether it's Canadian, or whether it's Scotch, or whether it's Irish, I think that you have to figure out what works for that climate to try to get
And Texas whiskey is still in its relative infancy. I mean, we're talking about, I don't know, 15 years now, or I forget, it was
Yeah.
2005 or
Yeah.
maybe almost 20 years.
But they all talk to each other, and they all, Texas Whiskey Association, all the things.
We've
do
jumped
all
into the USA bourbon, so let's
Oh,
just keep
sorry.
going. No. That's fine. Because it kind of, these things take us there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I was holding on to the USA as a talking point was because, I think there's this perception, which is wrong, that in order to be bourbon, it's got to be made in Kentucky. We know that's not right. But bourbon, is it still around 90% that's still made there? I think that number's got to be changing.
In Kentucky,
Yeah. I mean, it used to always be
it's smaller
said.
than it was. for
Yeah, I was
sure.
going to say it's
Yeah.
changed.
I don't think it's 90 anymore.
Because I read an article not too long ago that every state is now making bourbon.
Okay, is it every now? Because there were a couple that were missing, I think.
Yeah, now it's like every state is making
Mm-hmm.
bourbon. So that's cool to me because you're going to get a different expression. You know, I'm a big wine guy. When we think
Yeah.
about wine, and I always say if you like Cabernet from Napa Valley, doesn't mean you're going to like Cabernet from Bordeaux. You might, and you should, because it's different. It's
Yeah.
not going to be the same. So don't expect it to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think USA does. When we talk about Scotland, it's Scotch. When we talk about Irish, it's Irish. The USA plays with single malts. We're known for bourbon. That's our
That's
thing.
a big growing category now.
So I want to talk
Yeah.
about that. Let's talk about the bourbons first, kind of where it is, the diversity of bourbons, and then kind of how you see that continuing to go with, we're still in this, I think, this craze, this bourbon hype. I think it's kind of starting to.
It's leveled out.
Yeah.
The question is, will it stay where it is, or will it
Yeah.
go down or up?
So talk about this.
It's changed.
How do you see the market with the Whiskey Social? That's something that you guys have to be kind of, watching.
I think demand is still there, for sure. I think the market is still big. I think you're coming out of a season where, I mean, anybody in the liquor industry would tell you that going in, during COVID, it was a whole different world where
Yeah.
they're
That was
stuck
the
at home,
boomiest of booms.
and it was just spikes of. I mean, I was talking to some other folks who are in the industry, but it's like I think you saw like 20, 30, 40% increases in
Well,
what
I mean,
was being purchased,
Yeah,
right?
COVID. All your disposable income went to alcohol.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
couldn't travel.
Yeah.
You couldn't go out to eat. You couldn't, just
Yeah,
go buy
so-
it and pick it up.
So I think it again depends on how you may want to look at it. You're trying to extrapolate, what happens from there and what is
Yeah.
normal, or what your frame of reference is for normal. I think we've leveled out a bit, as Todd said. Demand is still there. Demand is still strong. I think we're obviously here still and enjoying
Still a
it.
lot of new brands entering the market.
Yeah.
I mean, the production, I've noticed, the thing that I've noticed, and this is the thing that's hard to tell. I think that's you probably can say that sales are down for bourbon and for whiskey. Now, why is the question? But you're starting to see bottles on the shelves that I haven't seen for a long time. Like Henry McKenna 10
Yeah.
has been around. Booker's is like on the shelf. I saw Eagle Rare. People were posting in HBS about that.
Heaven Hill bottle.
So
of Bond.
now,
yeah.
but also these brands like Sazerac, Buffalo Trace, they started throwing barrels down. I forget how many years now, but it's got to be 6, 7, 8. So you're going to start seeing like Blanton's the production being increased. So
Huge production increases, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and I think that's going to help feed the demand, because even if people are dropping off, if you start putting Blanton's on the shelves, you're going to sell more whiskey.
Oh,
People
for
are
sure.
going to go get it. These bottles that they covet and can't get easily now.
Absolutely.
There's got to be some, I mean, just like anything that I'm sure investors notice that, like, hey, this market was really hot, even coming out of like the COVID time or whatever. So you're going to have a lot of investment money going into new brands of whiskey and things like that. And I mean, if you see something that's, skyrocketing in sales and revenue, it's going to attract all kind of people.
Sure.
Maybe some of those people who aren't necessarily like passionate about this thing, and maybe they're more focused on profit generation. I don't know. I mean, whatever the case may be, maybe they fall off. But I think I think that just with the scene in general right now, and people's love of like American spirit, and there's been so much focus, you're still going to have a good market.
Yeah,
It's just it may not be.
I think this is a
nuts.
course correction is going to have to happen, because so many brands entered. There's so many brands on the shelves. Like I said, some of those won't succeed. You're going to have a lot of good whiskey on the shelf, and people are going to then have things to buy that they can't right now because they can't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also want to talk about. I think that the interest hasn't went down at all. I mean, I still know younger guys. My son's in his 20s, and I know I have friends who have sons in their late 20s, early 30s, and they're all getting into bourbon, and they're really hyped about bourbon. But they're also in that same tater stage that we're once in, where all they're looking for is Blanton's and
Sure.
Antique 107 and all that stuff.
That's the effect of marketing. Just
Yes.
I mean,
well, in Facebook groups.
yeah, right.
But
It's
those
just marketing.
brands are coveted for a reason.
Yeah,
also,
when I
right?
say marketing, I think I mean a combination of the marketing of the big brands, but also the social media and word of
Yeah.
mouth. That
Yeah,
your average person only hears Blanton's and Eagle Rare and Pappy,
yeah,
and that's that's all one brand.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you throw E.H. Taylor in
and
there.
then it's the same path everyone follows, and you learn more, and then you start to realize that these brands are very good. There's a reason why they're popular, because they they do what they do very well for the price. The problem is you never pay that price because it's allocated. But there's so many good brands on the shelf, and that's part of the deal with the Whiskey Social that we try to show is try these other brands, because there are lots of great whiskeys out there that they may be cheap, they may be expensive, they may be better than Weller or worse, but you have to find what you like, and the only way to do that in whiskey is to keep drinking, keep trying and tasting and
I've seen, and kind of going off maybe the bourbon side, but into different whiskeys that are available in the United States. I've seen definitely a rise in people's interest in rye.
mm-hmm.
Definitely
sure.
single malts as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
I mean, I have definitely seen the whiskey as a whole grown.
I brought a rye.
Oh,
This
nice.
is an interesting one.
Oh, yeah. I'm very interested in trying that one. But I have seen other parts of the whiskey industry in the United States growing quite a bit. And I don't know if rye is just the result of people liking bourbon. They want to try something else. It's a traditional.
It's funny you do
spirit.
that. So I think more brands seem to be, at least my perception is that more brands are trying a rise. And I agree with you. I think that once people get into bourbon, initially the rye is a bit much for them. It's spicier. It's the notes that they're getting are more herbal, and it's not what they want, the same sweetness and corn. I mean, I don't know how many times I've been sitting at this bar when someone's getting an old fashioned and they're like, what bourbon should I put in this? And I'm like, I would say not at all.
I would say don't put bourbon in it.
Put a high proof rye in there.
Yeah.
And so it's funny. The other night I was talking to McTavish Spirits, which is one of the vendors that's coming, and their initial release was a bourbon, and they did a rye, and it's a 3-year-old rye, which is very young. So when I hear that, I think right away I'm kind of like, it's going to be young. It's going to be kind of brash and woody, and but it's distilled green. I hope I'm not right. Green River. Is it Green River?
Yeah.
So it's not, and it's 95.5. So
Okay.
Oh, wow.
I went into it. So for the listeners, 95% rye. That's the 95.5, and which I think the 5% is barley.
Yep.
Is kind of a big mash bill you see
Think
out there. 'Cause
Bullet when
It's almost like full rye. And MGP is the most prevalent out there, and it has certain notes. People say the dill note, like dill pickle or like black pepper. And this was just not at all, like all night, including David, the bartender, who's not in frame right now. But I was blinding people on it, and just, what age do you think this is, and what mash bill do you think this is? And nobody got it right. It's just interesting, the diversity even in a 95.5 rye. It's not what you expect. So it was very soft and sweet and tasted like a barely legal rye to me, which 51%. That's the bottom of the rye.
Yeah.
So I think releases like that get away from some of those divisive notes are bringing more people into it.
Yeah.
I like rye more than bourbon right now. I love it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need a lot of age, but it can take a lot of age. Like the best pours I've ever had are like 20-some-year-old ryes.
Really?
Yeah.
The best spirits I've ever had are old ryes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Had an old rye.
I think, like, I saw something on the shelf. I mean, there's new stuff getting released all the time, so I can't keep up with everything. But I mean, there was a Knob Creek. They had like a shelf extra aged rye, and I was like, okay, I might have to try that.
Wow.
Like I think it was like 10-year-old or something like that. I was like, wow, that's just a shelf rye. I got to try that.
You mentioned Bullet. Was it you that first got this? There's Bullet makes a 12-year-old rye. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah.
And it's
like $50.
It's a high rye 12-year-old, but like the extra age on that does
It's
some
fantastic.
interesting things.
Like over 75%?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it's like but the extra age on that is wild. Like you kind of go, wait, what am I drinking? It's fascinating.
I don't think it's very proofy, but
No, it's like 90.
no.
it's like 90 proof,
But
but
it's
it's
great.
good.
You guys want to try this one?
Sure.
Yeah.
So this is an MGP rye. So getting back, this is a 95.5 MGP rye. So we see a lot of this around.
Let's mention, you kind of brought it up, but talk
Yeah.
a little bit about this producer.
Sure. So William Price.
Yeah.
So they're in the Heights in Houston, and right now they're basically blending. They're doing a lot of single barrels. Eventually they're going to be distilling their own. Right now I think they're making gin and vodka. They have coffee liqueurs. They have lots of cool stuff. They let us do fun things. So this is one of our fun projects. We also have a maple syrup group
Yeah.
that has turned into mixing it with the whiskey hobby. So we picked a barrel that we felt like needed a little sweetness. So a rye that had a lot of character to it,
Yeah.
and needed to be kind of softened. And we dumped the rye. We put in some maple syrup from Vermont, Mom and Pop's, which is our favorite maple syrup, and aged the maple syrup. Sold the maple syrup for charity, and then we put the rye back in, and the rye was in there for I think a little over 10 weeks.
Oh wow.
And so it aged in the maple barrel. So I don't know if you can see it, but
That
it's a little
color.
viscous, and
Yeah.
it's a little cloudy because of all the rye and the sugar and everything in there. It's not overly sweet, but it is it's called the Maple Bomb. So you can get this at William Price right now. I think it's $65. It's a 6-year-old MGP rye aged in the Mom and Pop's cask. So,
Oh, that's cool.
and the thing that's cool about it is Mom and Pop's is a premium maple syrup,
Okay.
and we use their best stuff. So normally when you see this sort of thing, it's not always the greatest maple syrup. So this is made with, expensive ingredients. We didn't do it to make money. We did it because we wanted it to taste good.
And when
so-
when you say that, I kind of get that you might not always get the influence of what you think you're going to from the syrup or something. This one should absolutely be there.
yeah, it's there.
Okay.
It's undeniable.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys have had the HBS Balcones honey barrel that we did
Yes.
years ago. So that was like divisive because there were people who absolutely loved it, and there were people who were like, "That's way too much honey." When we did that, there was just waxy honey in the barrel that we had to like scoop out and filter, and it wasn't quite as bad. I didn't want to go that extreme, but it's still very much there. So
Is it fair to say that, I know rye is not an official whiskey of the United States, but unofficially it is. Is there any other countries that do? I'm not going to count Canada. Sorry.
Well, wasn't it?
Just not.
you still got a little bit in that one.
Wasn't rye the first spirit that we just?
Yeah, no, rye is. I mean, it is an American whiskey. American rye whiskey has guidelines.
Right.
Yeah, rye's been around a long time. I mean, Maryland rye, Pennsylvania rye
yeah,
back in the day before it went to Kentucky.
I mean, anybody that distills it, though, I would tell you that, right? Like,
Thank you.
it's one, a harder grain to work with. It's more finicky, and then two, significantly more expensive. Than
Yeah.
corn, right. So I
It
think
clogs
that's why.
up the stills, and so some people don't want to do it at all and run
Yeah.
it through.
It's a more expensive crop too than corn.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually like, I mean, there's some kind of history there that bourbon kind of took off because it was a little less expensive to make.
I do want to mention,
Yeah, I'm
as
not
we talk
surprised by
about bourbon and rye, but we mentioned bourbon, 51% corn has to be the leading grain to be called bourbon.
Mhm.
But what's unique in the States, and we see all these other states doing this, making bourbon, is that different varieties of corn
Yeah.
can,
Mhm.
kind of impact what you get in the bottle and can really make things fun and unique. And I'm trying to think of the Texas producer that all
Blue
they,
corn.
yes, that all
Iron
they-
Root.
Balcones. And
Balcones and Iron Root.
does it too. Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, Iron Root's another one that uses the blue corn. And when we go there, it hasn't been every year, but we do a retreat with the Houston Bourbon Society out to Iron Root in Denison, and they host us and walk us through everything. And they actually have made us cornbread from the corn, and then you can taste the whiskey, so that you can kind of tie
Well,
it
that's kinda
together.
cool.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah.
You tried this yet?
No, no, yeah, I know. It knows it's nice.
I mean, I think between the like with the regulations for what bourbon is being so tight, right? Like the varietal of corn you use, and I think like you guys mentioned it, Balcones started to do some of that to play around with what type of corn and how does that influence. Iron Root does it. I think that's one of the ways, right? Like there's good and bad, I think, to the narrowness of what bourbon is. When you open a bottle, you know what you're going to expect from a good bourbon, and I think there's a greatness to that. But there's also, as people start to distill it and make it, like, I think it's how do we figure out how to do something slightly different is when you mess with the mash bill a little bit where you can and tweak the percentages, and when you change the varietals.
Sure.
I'm gonna let you make your comments because I see your
I
face.
just need to call Brian and tell him to put a bottle back for me.
Oh yeah, I know.
Freaking good.
That is so good. Wow, it's great that they are right down the road from my house. But yeah, this is wild.
Mhm.
I will say, yes, you can tell it's sweet.
Yeah.
But it's not crazy.
No, it's not crazy. It's got balance. That's
That's
really how I would
that's
describe it.
it's what we really spent a lot of time trying to make it just right.
Yeah.
Because in the barrel, maple syrup is funny. It sticks to the sides a lot. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily going to all mix in, and We played around with dumping it out and like mixing it with a big wooden
Yeah.
and I think it came out good. I wanted it to be maple very present. Like definitely you need to know that the maple is there, but not too much.
Yeah.
But it's there on the nose too, where,
Yeah.
you know, to me on the nose, I'm
Very much on the nose.
the spice of a rye, you know, you get on the nose, it's there, but it's pushed down by the sweetness of the maple where you go, okay, I can tell that the
Yeah.
rye is there, but it's
What-
very unique and cool that you get this sweetness on top of that.
It almost tastes like a cocktail in a neat pour. You know, like it's great. It's really good.
I'm glad you like it.
Because the spiciness of the rye, you know, depending on the rye,
And an MGP 95.5 can be very spicy.
yes.
So we chose the rye for that reason because we felt like it needed to stand up to the maple without overly sweetening it. So
Yeah.
and that part was fun, that part of the process, because if you just pick the one you like the most, it may not do well with the maple syrup.
Right. Right.
So it just worked out in this case.
I want to say too that the you know, when I mentioned balance between the syrup and the rye, I'd also throw in the alcohol. I just had to look. I mean, 115. This is not drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one's
You know, it's
money-
not punching
money
you
for
hard.
this one.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Those are great.
Yeah.
Those are great.
Really
That's-
good.
That's fun to have something different.
So I'd be remiss that we did try the Irish whiskey and we never said anything
Yeah,
about it.
yeah.
So we should probably at least say something.
I still
about
have it in here.
Uh,
This is such a weird one.
It's such an oddball.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like toothpaste minty.
Yeah, it is.
You know,
Yeah, it is.
but I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But it's good.
Yeah.
I liked it.
You said minty. That's the note that I wasn't. What didn't come to me, but as soon as you said that, that's what it is. It's very minty. I think the finish, you can taste that. What was it? Cherry?
Yeah, you can taste the sherry, which really, I mean, if it
Or
were
Spanish brandy.
yeah, okay,
Yeah, you can taste it.
you can taste that, which probably, if it wasn't there, might not make this very good.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's definitely probably going to be the most unique thing that we try
Yeah.
today.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. Will this be at the social?
This one,
Might it be in that dusty category?
I have to. Well, this is Iron Roots cigar blend that they just released a couple months
mean
ago.
this one?
This one?
This one, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be there.
Oh, it'll be there.
Yeah, that.
Okay.
If I have to bring it myself,
Okay.
we'll make sure that
Yeah.
Money Price has
That's a
it.
fun pour.
Yeah.
William Price will be there though. They do a ton of fun things,
Yeah.
and like Todd said, they have a ton of other things that they experiment with.
And
which
if
is
you've
great.
never been there, go because their bar is great.
Yeah,
Uh,
they just remodeled and painted, and it's beautiful.
It's really nice.
And it's family friendly. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, people
Yeah.
think about
Yeah,
it.
there's
distillery.
games outside.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've even brought my like a 2.5-year-old over there before, just hey, you know, they've got snacks and stuff, and they've got, you know, usually have
food trucks.
Yeah,
there's beer
they'll,
spots.
they'll do
across the
movie
street.
nights. They do a lot of family friendly things there.
Yeah.
It's a great place.
really cool.
Absolutely. All right. So we're in the world of bourbon and rye, but you know, when we think about, or at least for me, when I think about the United States and everybody that makes, you know, bourbon now, I always come back to, if I think of a unique place, some place that's different, that's making something that could be very special, you know, in the future and then maybe the near future. And it's Texas. We've kind of talked about it a little bit, but our weather here, you know, the state as big as it is, when you go to the West and the mountains and what you have, I mean, talk a little bit about Texas and where you see whiskeys coming from Texas in the next few years.
You want? Okay. Well, so like I said, Texas is still finding its identity, although it's made strides. I mean, I feel like I've been saying that for years. Iron Root is a good example of. I mean, Don mentioned what they're doing at Fierce Whiskers. Iron Root's another example of innovation. They do the élevage technique, which is a cognac thing that they do for cognac, where they're adding water back into the barrel, they're rotating the barrels, they're doing what they can to battle that heat and aging so that it doesn't become over oaked quickly. And so Iron Root's a great example of a Texas bourbon that has taken steps to try to dial back that. I would say a lot of Texas whiskey is a bit grainy, and I'm not saying that in a bad way, but it's more grain forward.
Mhm.
It can be hot. You get a lot of oak because of the aging, and you can see the color on this. And I forget what they said the age is on this. I don't know if it says it on there, but 48 months. So this is 4 years old, and it's pretty dark. And then you have Balcones that's actually doing kind of pivoting more, or not even a pivot, single malt is their thing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cool stuff happening in Texas, but I think the misconception is that people go into it thinking that it's going to be Kentucky
Yeah.
bourbon. And it is not that.
Yeah.
You know, Kentucky is what it is because they have seasons that you know, it lets the barrels breathe constantly.
Yep.
And whereas Texas is like boom, yeah, you know, here's 95 degrees for 5 months.
And we're in late October and we're still around 90.
Yeah, we're hitting
Yeah.
90 during the day.
So,
Yeah.
just to give you some perspective there.
Yeah. So I think the biggest challenge for Texas is the weather, is figuring out how do we do this.
Yeah.
And the question still remains, can they do a 12-year-old bourbon in Texas?
Yeah.
I mean, Balcones and Garrison are the two oldest.
You put it in a rick house.
I think I said
ground.
2000. I think it's more like 2008 or 9. I forget what the year is. But yeah, they're still trying to figure it out. Like how long can we let this go for, and you know what's going to work.
Yeah.
But age, it may be that it can't handle that sort of age, and that the sweet spot for Texas is 3 to 5 years. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I think the cool part is you see the distillers doing different things, like Todd said, to adjust for that and to create different flavor profiles, whether it's the grain, whether it's, you know, Fierce Whiskers, their stuff is weeded, right? Like to try to soften some of that bite. You know, Balcones has done a heavy amount of things in the single malt, and that's, I think, a large enough part of the reason that Diageo bought them out, right? Is that they're
That category, it was smart
I mean, it's-
timing
it's-
because that single malt or the American malt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
single
mean,
malt
I
categories.
think, you know, in a lot of those cases, right? Like, if you go in thinking it's going to be Kentucky bourbon, you're gonna get it wrong, right? Like, and you're gonna maybe not have the right sentiment towards it. If you go in with an open mind that it might be different, and it might be really cool, and it might be amazing, in a different way, without expectation, then I think, to me, that's sort of where Texas whiskey is going. Is, well, what can I do that's different, that takes advantage of the climate, the elevation, the things that we have in a different way,
Yeah.
to do something different.
I
Yeah.
almost feel like in Texas, they shouldn't put an age statement on there because too many whiskey people think, you know, the quality or what you have in the bottle is so influenced by that. But when you get the heat and the things that we do here, that may not be as big a
Yeah.
indicator of what's in the bottle than some people think it is.
I mean, you know, I've tended to think that the single malt route might be the way to go because I've had a lot of better single malts than things in the whiskey, traditional whiskey area seem to go. But then again, I mean, it could be something as far as messing around with barrel composition,
Yeah.
or messing around with toast level, or like whatever
Yep.
it is. You know,
I got to think toast level's low.
yeah,
They mess with barrel. They mess with the size of the barrel,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you know, and that kind of stuff.
Balcones has used 5-gallon barrels, and then they age in that, and then they blend them together or put them into a larger barrel to age. I mean, there's lots of different things that they've done.
Sure.
But there'll be a ton. I mean, again, you know, maybe shameless plug, but I mean, Rebecca Creek, Ranger Creek, William Price, Fierce with all Iron Root, all these folks are going to be there at the social, and come try out all the different expressions.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
You know, and I think that's part of the coolness, to see the different things that people are doing for Texas whiskey. But I think so also part of the difficulty, right? There's so many different SKUs that are there. You're like, it's almost indecision of like,
Yeah.
I don't know what that's going to be like. Do
Right.
I want to try that?
But
But
one
I
thing
think
I
you'll
would
find
say to
things that
that
are
is,
great.
if you taste 2 or 3 in a category like Texas,
Yeah.
that you go, okay, I'm intrigued a little.
Yeah.
Then at least when you leave the social, you know, I like that. Let
Yeah.
me go explore some more
Yeah.
things that
Yeah.
are at a bar. Or on
We
a
we
shelf.
always tell people on HBS when they say, "What should I drink?" And you know, the veterans will usually say, "What do you like?" Go out and try stuff. And we always say, just go to a bar and try it before you buy the bottle. Well, that's what our event does. Is it's like,
Absolutely.
go to the
Yeah.
event and you can taste them all at once.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
Right.
To your point before, right? I mean, if you think about how many tastes that you can have for the price, like, we really personally feel like we try to make it a really good value event, right? And so for the GA ticket, you know, under $100 and VIP at 155, like,
I want to say you're not trying, you're doing it. It's
yeah.
value.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's, where are you going to go and try that many different things all in one spot at that price point?
Yeah.
It's
and
difficult.
we just raised our prices a bit too, and I probably shouldn't even talk about that, but it's only because like for the Pappy and the BTAC, it's getting harder and harder for us to source those bottles. Like we
Yeah,
have to,
sure.
we have to get those bottles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we often have to find
You-
them
you
in
mean-
creative ways,
Julia's not sending
which
those
costs
to
more
you?
money. Yeah, right.
Well, I think still, I mean, you know,
Yeah.
the price of the ticket is
Yeah,
well
it's
worth
it's
it.
still an amazing bargain.
Yeah.
And you know, past years people go home with bottles if they buy the VIP tickets,
Yeah.
and that just adds to the
And
value.
not just any bottle. I mean, this isn't something that you go home with a nice gift that's a cool bottle.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing, I mean, like my approach has always been, and you know, as somebody who's a little bit more of a veteran toward, you know, this stuff is what's something that I don't drink a lot of?
Yeah.
Scotch. I
Mhm.
don't drink a lot of scotch. So I try and hunt out the scotch area as much as I
Yeah.
can.
Mhm.
You know, there's some rum there. Go try some rum. If you've never been like a big rum fan, I mean, I'd say as a whiskey drinker, it's an awesome spirit
Yeah.
that you'll enjoy. So I always kind of take a different approach.
And
to it.
those are the two spirits that I think have the most people that think that they know what it is, but they really don't. Like Scotch, everyone thinks it's peated,
Yeah.
and they think I don't like all that smoke. And
Yeah.
it's like it's the same thing with mezcal, which is my current favorite spirit, actually. And people say smoky, and it's like it's really not. It's more earthy. It's not always smoky. It can be vegetal. And with Scotch, I mean, I usually put people into sherried Scotch, like a Glendronach or
Yeah.
a Macallan. I mean, there's lots of brands that use sherry. It's a little bit on more towards sweet on the profile than smoky at all, if at all. And then what was the other spirit that you mentioned? Oh,
Rum.
rum. Yeah, people think rum is just sweet and it's for cocktails, and
Yeah.
it's way more than that.
Yeah.
It's just so much more to
Yeah.
it.
And to your point earlier, right? Of well, you may have had some things before, but maybe not side by side, right? And I think we as spirits nerds and all of that would say like that's the best way to try things, right? If you try something in a single instance and your palate is not tasting other things, it's hard in isolation to really make a judgment call of, well, how good is this relative to other things, or how
Right.
much do I like it relative to other things? And I think, you know, whether that's the Pappy Taste and the B-Tax, or even, you know, you can taste all of these Texas offerings or all of these other offerings side by side and sort of get a little bit of a relative sense of where they are for you and your palate and what you like. And then I would say, you know, one thing that Todd and I are also trying to talk about doing is we just did a Eagle Rare tasting, you know, not that long ago, where we did, you know, some single barrels, the standard shelf offering, the double Eagle Very Rare, and a dusty version of Eagle Rare Lawrenceburg 10-year 101, where you kind of go, we've all tasted, or Todd and I had tasted them before separately, but even us, like I was like, man, I don't think I've ever done them side by side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's a difference to that, right? Where you say like, yeah, I loved that and that was amazing. But then the relativeness of doing it side by side is just a different experience. And I think we want to try
I'm
to
going
do
to say that's a double-edged sword sometimes.
fair enough.
Yeah. Because sometimes you get two great pours and one you
Yeah.
just absolutely love, and you go, this one's all right. But, you know, have that on any other night, and you're like, that's
Yeah.
Amazing.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
I definitely agree with
Yeah, that's fair.
and but there is definite merit to trying them side by side as well.
Yeah.
Like I mean, Four Roses, for example, they're like if you try something that's 6th tier, like super hot, you know, and then you try something that's tier 1, tier 2, you know, you might go, God, this
What
tier
is
1, this thing doesn't even hold up at all.
Yeah.
But if that was your first pour of the night and you tried it and you go, man, that could
Amazing.
be the
Yeah.
best pour that I've had, you know.
I'm glad you brought up the Eagle Rare tasting, because we've been trying to do more events throughout the year. So we got our hands on that double Eagle Very Rare, and we thought like let's do a fun event around that. So that's a big bottle, and it's
Yeah.
been floating around the city. I mean, it came in a couple months ago when everybody was tasting it, and that's a very expensive
Yeah.
big bottle. And we grabbed a 1982 Eagle Rare Lawrenceburg, which is kind of known as one of the best things that they've ever
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Which was cheaper than the double Eagle, and it was everybody's favorite.
wow.
So it shows you again, you have this big fancy bottle, which by the way was very good.
Very good.
And then you have the standard offering from 82, which was again not quite bottom shelf, but that product was created to go against Wild
Cuban
Turkey.
turkey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
8101.
I want to say something about drinking at the social, talking about, you know, exploring and trying new things. I do want to mention that, you know, a lot of us, me included, you would try something and go, I don't like it. And then you're hesitant to ever try it again.
Yeah.
Mm.
I would say don't quit. I can remember getting into bourbon in like 2015 and liking it. And then, shortly after that, trying scotch and going, this sucks, and not wanting to try it again for a long time. But as you drink and you get used to more spirits, especially neat, your palate does change. And now, you did a scotch episode with us, Todd, and I really enjoy the diversity of scotch, the different ways you can go, and things I didn't like before now I actually enjoy. So I would say, just because you go, I don't like it now, don't quit on the spirit. In a year or two, try it again and just see if you do like it.
I've been there when I first started buying bourbon. I probably had 5 or 6 bottles, and there were a couple that on first sip I put it aside, and I'm like, I don't really like that. And then a year later, I picked it up. I'm like, I'll just give this a shot, and then it would be something that I love.
Yeah,
and that's not. Let me just be clear. It's not because it changed in the bottle. I changed. My palate changed.
You mean the air didn't do something?
No. And my palate, tomorrow you might drink this and find it to be different than you had at the first.
But I see all these posts that they say they let it open up for a month and it was better.
We just don't correct him anymore on that.
I think
I've always just been a neck pour guy. I actually just like the neck pour.
Okay, now the neck pour's gone.
Yeah.
I just think it's hard to, the more you can understand the variation that you can get in an entire category of scotch or Irish or other things, you have one pour from one expression that you may not like. And like you said, don't write off the whole category, because that's such a small piece potentially of what that could be. And there's such a wide range of flavor profiles and that can come out of that. It's not a great thing to just write off the whole category just because you had one.
It. If you don't like a burger from one place, you're not going to stop eating burgers.
Yeah.
You're gonna make a good burger.
Well, I mean,
in the world of spirits.
It's a good point.
I used to think, oh man, heavily peated scotch, I absolutely hate it. Won't ever try it again. Like it just tastes like barbecue or something. And now I've like kind of come back around, and I'm like, I really kind of like some of this stuff.
You're like, what is this?
I just had a Kalila at Anvil that had a 25-year on break even, and barbecue was one of the notes they put on there.
Yeah.
Which is funny. So,
but
the notes that your average person would see that we say, that they'd be like, that doesn't sound good. An ashtray, like a medical kit, a Band-Aid.
a Band-Aid. That's the worst. But
what'd you guys think of the Iron Root, by the way?
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah.
It's nice. It's got a good balance to it.
Yeah.
I really like it.
It's great to see how their stuff has evolved to me. And this is a cigar malt. So this one I think is the profile is meant to be kind of paired with a cigar.
Yeah.
But you don't need one. It's still delicious as is.
That's very good.
It's rich and spicy. It's
Okay, talking about countries from around the world, let's do this. In my opinion, tell me if I'm wrong, when I think about Japan, India, Taiwan, places that have really good whiskey, it's in that Scotch profile.
Mm-hmm.
Do they do anything else that's not? I always just think that Scotch, that single malt kind of profile.
I mean, I think that's the
that's it.
predominant
Okay.
in the countries that you named. Yeah.
And then for Taiwan, I just think that the one
Kavalan,
brand. That's the one
Yeah.
Is there other ones that you guys know from there?
That's the one that I know.
Okay.
And I liked Amroot. Is a single malt producer. And Chris did a pick with them for
I remember that.
the whiskey.
It's been a few years ago.
For the podcast. I think it was for Whiskey Neat.
It was
I
very
thought
good.
It was great for $100.
Yeah.
And it was young. I think it was only a couple years old, maybe 4 years old.
Yeah.
But I thought it was delicious.
So we're going to dive into just quickly on Scott, and we'll get ready to wrap things up. But what are there, I got to assume weather and things, location play different. What are some noticeable or things that you guys know about Taiwanese and Indian and Japanese?
Rob, what in the world did you just do?
Boom.
Yeah.
I would say it reminds me of Texas whiskey in that they're battling with heat.
All
in
of
those
those
places.
locations.
Yeah. So it has that. Again, I think like with Kavalan as an example, it's very grainy to me, and that's just a note. That doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, but I think that the aging happens faster. You get a lot more wood extraction in those, the darker color, and with Kavalan, I mean, they do a lot of sherries and wines, and it's with the Indian as well. Like the Amroot that we did was just an absolute sherry bomb, and it just adds to it's so intense in flavor.
Yeah.
Let's give them a second.
Okay. Well, I think Todd brought out some scotch, so
Yeah.
we should try that since we're
Let's go for it.
Yeah, in Scotland, when you age that stuff there, right? Like you've got colder temps, you have higher humidity, and so just the different, I think, climates that you're going with do very different things over time, right?
Like I think Isla is an example of like terroir when you're talking about it. Like they say that, you know, it's right on the water, it's picking up the salt air, the cool weather, the bogs, like it all just like makes sense. It's like mezcal, it's to me a spirit that just feels like the area it came from. You know, I want to be sitting by a fire in the cold weather in Scotland and sipping on this, you know.
And I will say that the sea's influence is definitely there.
Yeah.
I mean, in Scotland, I mean, even between different distilleries, you know, proximity to the sea matters. You know.
Well, I want to ask this too. When we talk about these areas making single malts, they don't play by Scottish rules, right? So when I think about Scotch, and we're going to kind of tie because they're all kind of the malted barley. When I think about Scotch, I think about, you know, a single malt, a blended malt, a single grain malt, you know, a blended grain, and then blended Scotch is kind of those categories. Do they do a similar type of?
A lot of the American single malts do, and they just like with Japanese whiskey, it's Scotch, not made in Scotland.
Okay, it is. So they follow
in most cases.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing I would say about Scotch that I think makes it really cool is the finishing. You know, when we talk about bourbon, you don't want to finish it; it's no longer bourbon. To me, what makes a lot of the scotches so delicious is that it's finished in certain
I don't think that they need it, but there's a reason why you see most scotch on the shelves is finished, and this one's actually not too dark.
No,
it's because I think it is a little bit of it can be a little bit lighter without the finishing, again because of the colder climate. And even with a lot of age, I mean, I've seen scotch that's 20, 25 years old, and if it wasn't finished in a secondary barrel, it's very light.
Oh, yeah.
The color of hay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some distilleries over there are allowed to add color to their product.
That's more than 80 proof.
Yeah, that's more than 80.
That one is
58 or 50.
Okay. You know, a lot of people think Scotch and they go 80 proof all the time. Not all of these, but
this is a cast strength, and this is a sherry, I believe.
Oh man, that's so good.
Yeah, it is.
16 years old, Glenallachie. So Glenallachie will be there at the event.
Non-chill filtered. That's another thing that's kind of new in Scotland.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the bourbon influence or not. In this case, Billy Walker is the master distiller of Glenallachie, and he was previously at GlenDronach, which is one of my favorite Scotch brands. And he's done a lot of interesting things.
Yeah, that's delicious.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and Impex as an importer, they have a bunch of brands that they bring in, and so they'll be at the event and have a ton of different expressions of Scotch.
So if
So
you're
if you're
looking for
interested in exploring, like
Oh,
they will have a
definitely.
lot. So
Well, you guys have had a signatory there before, and they have some. They'll have some crazy stuff. You know, I think I tried something that was crazy aged in sherry for a very, very, very long time at the event a couple years ago, and I was like, "That is the wildest thing I've ever."
Was it an Edgedour?
Yeah,
Yeah, they're just absolute cherry bombs,
like it was awesome though.
and it's like black.
Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
very dark.
there's some you're like, what color is
Yeah,
that?
it gets really like like the sulfur note, you know, like brimstone or
Yeah,
it's wild.
It's bad that I just finished that.
No,
No, but it's
some more.
No, I'm good. But that's
Dude,
quite good.
So good.
That is
It's
really
really good.
good.
It's amazing. So you can actually get Specs. This is I got mine at Specs. You can get there was a few different releases. These are on the shelf right now. Maybe not this specific one.
Yeah.
But I would say they're all in the same quality range.
Okay.
You know, you really can't go wrong.
That is so good.
Yeah.
I have found there's not a lot of cast strength scotches. I mean,
There's
more and more.
Yeah, there's more than you would
now.
think. Yeah.
It seems like you can find them now. But like in comparison to bourbon, there's a lot of cast strength bourbon and that kind of thing. But I find it to be oftentimes just such a great expression. And maybe it's just because I'm new to the Scotch world, you know, and I'm doing the whole bourbon thing
chasing proof.
where I'm chasing proof and then I'll come back down to normal. But
Unlike bourbon, which again, like I said, it's getting better to get the bottles that people want to seek out. There's still tons of great stuff on the shelf, of course, but Scotch is just it's not as popular. I mean, Scotch is popular. I don't want to say it's not, but in the States, you can still get these great bottles. at the shelf price, basically. Now,
Yeah.
now the starting point is higher.
Yeah.
So with bourbon, you can get a really good, nice release for $30-$40.
But
Scotch, I mean, you can as well.
but
Or-
let's just say a young Scotch is 10 years.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, when you
Yeah.
talk about bourbon, that's a sweet spot where that's
And-
entry level.
And for a
Scotch.
10-year Scotch, you're going to pay $60
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not bad.
and up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
I
could
mean,
be
it's-
$100 for a single barrel.
Yeah. No doubt. No doubt. Well, I mean,
But you don't really have to go beyond $200 or $300 though. Like there's so many now. Not that that's a small number, but in
But
bourbon,
for a phenomenal
in bourbon, you're paying $300 for something that's actually $50 because you have to get it on the secondary
I
market.
think a lot of cases when
Right.
people say like, "Oh, I need a great gift bottle and I want to be in the $200+ range," right? Like the bourbons that would fit that, one, are fewer, but two
there aren't many.
are so allocated that you won't
Yeah.
get your hands on it, at least in a category like Scotch, to your point, right? Like it's not so picked over that you can't find a really solid offering for that occasion and that purpose
Yeah.
that you might be looking for.
I do feel like Scotch is definitely more of a world whiskey, though. Like the rest of the world drinks
Yeah,
Scotch,
for sure.
Yeah.
You know, and the bourbon is really U.S. Driven.
Yeah, because they can't use the term at all.
Yeah,
Like you.
right. So I mean, you know, I maybe that's has to do with the availability.
Well, we
you know?
always talk about diversity, and bourbon is a more narrow range. And where the diversity in bourbon comes is in Dusty's, because over the years it's changed quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Whereas Scotch, you know, you can look at stuff that was distilled 10 years ago from 10 different distilleries, and the range is immense, especially when you talk about peat. You
Yeah.
know, peated versus unpeated, like
And-
the range is amazing.
Am I also wrong to say I'm the old guy here at the table? So I always think there was this perception. You know, you think in wine of having this kind of snobbery or it's this sophisticated, classy kind of drink. Scotch to me was always in that category.
Yeah.
You know, it was always if you're going to talk to somebody about a nice pour, it was like you got a 12-year-old Scotch. You know,
Yeah.
I think about MASH growing up watching MASH and Winchester getting his 12-year-old Scotch. Scotch to me was always this kind of elevated kind of pour, where bourbon was that working man's kind of
Yep.
pour.
I think it's a little bit of an illusion because Scotch is what got me into whiskey. I work for a law firm, and I worked for law firms for a long time. So I thought, okay, these lawyers, especially the older lawyers, they're drinking Scotch or smoking cigars. I need to be in this conversation.
Yeah.
But the reality is, there's lots of Scotch you can get that's not expensive,
Yeah.
and most people don't really know that much
Yeah.
about Scotch or any spirit. Most
When-
people
when
haven't
they
gone
think
down
they
the
do.
rabbit hole. That's right. So you don't need to know much. Most of the people that are spouting things off probably don't really know everything that
Yeah.
or they're saying, you know, wrong things. I'm sure that I've said wrong things today, and I would consider myself like, you know, I don't want to say expert, but more, you know, we
Further down the rabbit hole.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's finish up the episode. And by the way, I've enjoyed this conversation. This has been great.
Yeah. Thank you.
But I want to finish it up with the Whiskey Social, ending on this, talking about who are 2 or 3 producers, vendors coming back that you're excited to have back, and who are 2 or 3 first-time participants that you're excited to have join the Whiskey Social. Are there any
let,
first
let
time?
me start with well, okay, so it's their second time, but I just spent some time with McTavish. I think that they're
Okay, let's
doing
talk
really
about who
good
this
stuff.
is.
Yeah. So
more.
Graham McTavish is an actor. He's been in a lot of things. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
he was in The Hobbit,
Mm-hmm.
and he was actually in Rambo back in the day.
Yeah.
Outlander.
And The Witcher.
Outlander's the big-
That's the
yeah,
big one
more
that we
recent.
know for now, yeah. And so he has a spirits brand, and I expected it to be a Scotch. It's an American whiskey brand
Oh,
because
really?
Yeah.
he likes bourbon.
Yeah.
So
And wine.
Yeah.
He's a wine guy.
and they just released a rye that I think
Somebody
is
took a picture
very
with him
good.
last year.
I sure did.
Yeah, he'll be back.
Well, my wife requested that I take a picture with him.
Hey, you
Uh,
know.
Okay, so that's one coming back that you're
Yeah.
excited to have back.
Porchetta is a new one that's come in. I mean, who else? And Porchetta is a Tennessee
And I didn't
whiskey.
mean to put you guys on the spot.
No, that's
No, no,
okay. Yeah, it's a Tennessee whiskey that uses a wheated mash bill, which is not something that we've seen. And as a spirits nerd, again, you know, I like to try stuff that's not something that we've seen before.
Yeah.
I
That's another example.
I think that's a new one that's I'm excited to see. William Price is great to have back, and I think they're doing some new things, and there will be some I don't necessarily want to give it all away, but some slight relaunching of things as they're kind of doing some new things. It's always good to see Sagamore back, and they've gone through a handover as they got purchased by DiSerono, so that'll be interesting to see. New for us there, I think. Well, not necessarily new, but back after, big brands like Beam Suntory, right? Like have brought different brands over the years, but I don't think we've had Knob Creek for a little while, so it'll be fun to see them back along with El Tesoro.
That'll be
their other
interesting to see
offerings, so-
what they bring in the Knob Creek line.
Yeah.
Well, so like I meant to say this earlier. So we also do tasting classes at the event, and where we give the brands, it's on a first come first serve basis, brands the opportunity to do a class during the event. And one of the cool things is that the Beam Suntory is doing is they're going to have like the Knob Creek, and then they're going to have El Tesoro tequila, and then they're going to have El Tesoro tequila aged in Knob Creek casks.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
So
nice.
it's like seeing the barrel influence that the bourbon has on other spirits will be really cool.
Very cool.
Very cool. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. Nice. Are you guys going to have Four Roses this year?
They're not going to be there this year.
Okay.
But we will have Four Roses. I was going to bring it, but it's pretty difficult to lug. I don't know if you saw previously, we did a Four Roses event two years ago.
Yeah, I
where
was
we-
there.
where we did all 10. Well, we got more of those 4-liter bottles, which, okay, this is a 750 milliliter. The 4 liters about
It's
this
huge.
and it's about like this much around. So we have 2 of those. And I mean, I'm considering getting some sort of like baby carrier to like just walk around with this thing, like, because it I don't know how much it weighs. It's pretty heavy.
It's big.
'Cause these are 3 pounds for a 750. So it's probably
A 4 liter is going to be pretty heavy.
Stout.
And those were Japanese releases, right?
They are, yeah. Yeah.
That's cool.
I do want to say one thing that I always find fun at the Whiskey Social is you talked about a Dusty's table, or it's really not. It's just kind of a pop up. One of you guys all of a sudden has a bottle, and people watching. It's fun just to sit back and somebody will just put up a bottle and scream out what they have, and
Yeah.
I mean
That's
they
Oh,
just-
yeah.
my favorite part of the event is walking around and making people happy with that. And it's funny because some people, I guess, maybe I need to have more signage on my body that says that I'm with the Whiskey Social, because I'm like, hey, you want to try this? And they kind of look at me like, what is that?
Yeah,
And I'm like, well, this is from the 70s. Like, aren't you excited? And they're like, is it good? I'm like, well, try
just
it.
do this.
Has it gone bad?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Well, guys,
awesome.
This has been a great conversation. Really appreciate it. Really excited about the social this year. 9th year. So next
Yeah.
year, I'm assuming big year.
Something
10th
big.
anniversary.
Something
Yeah.
big.
Something's going to be happening.
Yeah.
So that'll be cool to look forward to. But thanks so much for coming on and having a
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us. Really
guys.
appreciate it.
Remiss not to say thank you, man, for sharing such great pours.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
been
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.